Welcome, everyone, both people here and on Zoom. So today's forum topic is imagining the future, the Quaker movement and Friends Meeting of Austin in 30 years, 100 years, and 200 years. Yeah, I guess, before we get started, I'm hoping everyone will be able to participate. And for people here in the meeting house, you might need to just come up a little bit closer. This is the microphone here that we're using, so just so that people online can hear you. And people online, I probably won't be able to see you if you raise your hand. So if you just want to say something, just go ahead and unmute yourself and say whatever it is that you'd like to share. So yeah, before we get started, I guess just thinking about the first time frame, the one that's sort of easiest to imagine, even that one's really hard to imagine, 30 years. And I guess just for context and reference, so 30 years ago would be 1991. Probably unless you were very tech savvy and involved in the tech industry, you probably had never sent or received an email yet. The internet was just coming online that year in 1991. It was the presidency of George H.W. Bush. And just imagining how much things have changed since then. And thinking in terms of this meeting, I guess I'm not as knowledgeable in meeting house history, but I believe we were probably in Hyde Park or in that other house near UT at that time. And I guess, and I personally don't have a lot of memories of 1991. I was 4 years old at the time. And so I remember vaguely my parents talking about the Cold War and not knowing what they were talking about, it having recently ended and the world seeming open in new ways. And just to get a sense of that historical distance, I was wondering if anyone had memories of this meeting, this community, what it was like, where it was like, what the world felt like or looked like in 1991.
Warren's the only one who may have been here.
Well, we were over in Washington Square.
Do you want to come up, Warren, real quick? And
People can hear you.
Yeah.
oh, okay. Warren says he was here, but he has nothing more to say about that. Yeah, or anyone, I mean, maybe not even at this meeting. I know many of us probably were not here even, but if you were involved in a Quaker meeting anywhere, I'd be curious just to hear what that experience was like back then, or if that was actually even before you were involved in the Quaker movement.
Hi, James, this is Steve. I was a member of Swarthmore Friends meeting back then, and it seemed to me, I would have been what in my, I don't know, how many years ago is that, 30? 30. So I would have been in my 40s, and kids were not quite grown and out of the house, but the participation in Swarthmore Friends meeting, it was a bigger meeting for sure. There were probably 80 or 90 at least on Sundays, and a lot of good food afterwards. I do recall that. We had a full kitchen, and there was always a lot of socializing in the room adjacent to the kitchen, and a lot of kids. We had, I think, about 30 children, because I taught first day school, and I always had 8 or 9 for my group. So those are memories I have at the Friends meeting. The other thing is that there were a handful of people, Betty McCorkle, Joanna Sibbett, I can't remember the other two, who were very obviously what you hear about heavy Quakers. Just being near them, you felt a spiritual radiance and a depth that I aspired to and unfortunately have never achieved. But these were people who were probably in their 60s then, who just somehow embodied the calm, stillness, and joy that I associate with the best of Quakerism.
James, I attended this meeting off and on in the early 70s and came back in the late 90s, and I put up the first website for the meeting, and for CYM and so on. So I was sort of in on whatever measure of technical revolution in Quakers we had at that time. But Quakerism hasn't changed a lot. The way we communicate and organize yearly meetings it's changed more on the broader level. Like we've been able to do international Quaker groups like QUIP or QREC, FWCC. That the technology has made a big difference in terms of the means of communication and the dissemination of information. It's changed more in the social action realm, because when I was working for AFSC in the 70s and 80s, we printed a lot of leaflets and handed them by hand, and did a lot of hand mailings and depended a lot on the post office. And that's been a dramatic change in that world. But meeting for worship, I don't know if I see a lot of difference.
Yeah, I've been attending meetings since 1968 or so, in different places in the world, in the country rather. Well, I guess in the world. So, and when you get together with a group of friends, no matter where, for worship, it's very similar. Some friends don't have, some friends in the not in the unprogrammed world don't have quite the, they don't have the length of silence of silent worship that we do. Open worship. They call it open worship. They have periods of open worship. But when they settle into open worship, it feels very similar to what we do. So I bopped in here. We need to go to, everything's dry.
Okay.
Mute that. I need to come welcome people. So
I saw Galia had her hand up, James.
Oh yeah, Galia, yes.
Well, that was my first year at Friends Meeting. And I can remember that large room that many of you remember that we would sit. But it wasn't, we were busting out the seams, and we were up the stairs, and we were down the hall, and then the little foyer, and all these different places, trying to kind of stuff the people in. And then what was fun too was when potlucks would happen, or whatever we would have, it would be snaking around each of these areas that I'm remembering, so you'd have this long line and lots of children, jumping in the front of the line and getting, just wonderful memories of all the kids that are now parents themselves, so it's quite amazing there. And then one of the lovely things that we had was these wonderful picnic tables just right outside the door of the kitchen, and we would sit there and we would have topics at different tables. There would be whatever was the topic of concern that day was right there. So there was a lot of community time that we had built in. And because of our time in between, we kind of suffered a little bit that time, but we're building that back up, and I'm really glad to see that. So, but those were my memories of really my first year there at the meeting.
I was here in the 80s, first in the 80s. And we were in Washington Square, the house on Washington Square, which is very near UT. So we would have the regulars in worship, and then we would have maybe 10 visitors from UT, and they were just checking us out, and that would happen every Sunday, sometimes more, sometimes a little less. And I went to the Houston meeting just once, and I'd been active in South Central yearly meeting. And when I went in, I knew everyone in the Houston meeting. They were a closed, I mean, they were a group without visitors so much. And it felt really warm. We don't have visitors like we used to. I mean, we're always happy for visitors. But there got to be introduction fatigue with new people that were interested in Washington Square.
I'm remembering that time as well. And I think one of the things about our visitors was the proximity to the UT campus. It was easy for a lot of students to check us out. And students at that age, that's one of the things they do, is either reject religion entirely or check out other possible routes from what they grew up with. So I'm remembering that a lot of those visitors were students, and we had a lot of folks associated with the university at that time, many of whom have since retired and moved on in different places. I'm remembering the garden house, which we still call the little garden house at our new place, but the activities and the children playing there, and our child caregiver. Her name is not coming to my tongue at the moment, but yeah, things have changed for sure. I'm hoping that once this pandemic is over, we can invite more families and get more children back in our midst, because that's where a lot of the joy and bubbling is coming.
Well, I'm not great on dates, but I think I was living in Ireland at the time for a few years. And so I was in Dublin. So I went to Dublin meeting, and there are two of them there, but I went to one in Monkstown. And I really enjoyed it, and I reconnected with actually a teacher. I went to Quaker boarding school in Ireland, and one of my teachers was there, and that was really nice. And it was like what I know any Quaker meeting to be, you know, sitting in that nice energy, silence, and every now and again somebody speaking. And we had, you know, coffee or tea afterwards. And I have nice memories of it. And I'm happy to be in Austin, having some of those same experiences. Thank you.
Are there further thoughts that people want to share about what they remember from 30 years ago?
Hard to believe it was 30 years, but I was nearing the end of my first tenure track appointment, 5 years at Kansas State. There was a small meeting in Manhattan, Kansas, which really helped our life a lot. And we had a joint peace committee with the Mennonites, so my husband and son could sing four-part harmonies with the Mennonites, and be respected for being Quakers. And my Quaker son, as a result of his first day school, was the only one who knew who the mother of Daniel was in the Bible. Of all the Mennonite kids they had, I was really proud of the first day schools. He'd been in Schenectady, and anyway, 91, it was a very hard year for me because this small FGC meeting in Manhattan, Kansas had just wonderful people in it, like Margaret and Ken Conroe, who were the faculty at Kansas State, and a young woman, their daughter who was mentally handicapped, and I helped her with her horse, drove her out to the horse barn, and but it was full of anxiety because my meeting really was small, and they couldn't really help mediate the yelling that I was getting from the second husband about having to move because I didn't make tenure, as most people don't. And so I was on the way to an appointment in 92 in my associate professor role at Purdue, but that meeting turned out, and so much as I was anxious and getting resistance from husband and son who didn't want to leave Kansas, I was in for a good surprise, because in Chicago we had not only the Dunelands Friends meeting, but we had the University of Chicago Friends meeting at 15th Street, and that was a great meeting. That was large, and we had a lot of hymn singing with a couple that I guess worked for the Unitarians there, but the University of Chicago meeting, I guess, has changed a lot, but it was wonderful to go into Chicago and attend that meeting. So that was a hard transitional year, having to leave and have one's family not be supportive. And the meeting didn't really know, I don't know what we were going through, but they were important to be there, and it did help a lot. You never know. Maybe when we think that it's darkest is when a new thing is going to happen.
I feel like that's a wonderful segue into thinking about the present and the future. And now 30 years later, after 1991, here we are. And when I say here, I mean dispersed all over the internet and the world, as so many of us are. And here we are in the meeting with masks on. It feels a little bit already somewhat science fictional to me, if you think about it, even from the perspective of a year or two ago. And gosh, and I know that none of us have crystal balls, and it would be, and we'll certainly be wrong about almost everything that we'll probably say about the future, and just accepting that. But I was wondering, what do people envision for 30 years from now? Where are we? Who are we? What is this Quaker thing that we're part of in 30 years' time?
So when I was looking at the topic, the first thing that came to mind is that in 30 years, I think we'll be in, this is me, and I'm going to take it kind of on a little bit of a sideline of where I'm at with thinking about the future and where we are. But I see us being in church in what I used to call house churches. I see us being, our way of life, I believe, is going to change in a way that we're not prepared for. And I'd like to begin the conversation somewhere along this way of how do we get there? Because I can see 5 years, we'll think we're kind of sort of normal. We'll remember things, we'll forget things, and the change will be, somewhat subtle, but it's not going to be much longer, I don't think. And I think we're going to be needing to depend on each other, and we're going to need to find a community that's within a short distance of each other, so that we can, if we need be, walk and pedal to each other, and that we can worship together. I think, within maybe 15 years, the internet may not be as useful to us any longer. We may not have that option as much. I'm not sure where that will happen, but technology is not, there's a lot of wonderful technology out there, but so much of it is dependent on resources that we can't get a hold of. And you think about those things, and so much of what we're depending on right now is limited. And anyway, I see us, and I don't see this as necessarily a horrible thing. I think it's a big transition, but it's a conversation. And it's a conversation about food, it's a conversation about support, and it's a conversation about health. And as I see in the short term, if we talk 5-10 years, in the next 2 or 3 years, I see us get, support it, using our funds to help support various endeavors and making a thing stronger. And, while we have that option to be able to do that, at a certain point, I don't think we're going to have that. And I don't mean to be a wet blanket throwing it on, looking forward to the future, but that's what I think is going to happen. And I think it'll draw us closer. So that's the good things. There's things that are going to change, I believe. And I think they have to. Peak oil's gone. And we're on that downslide. So that's my 2 cents worth.
Thank you, Galia. I feel like that too. That I feel a bit of a sense of urgency around action. And I'm not sure exactly. I'm trying to make sure I have water and some food on hand and that kind of thing. But I do think the closeness, the proximity of people is very important. And I don't even think it needs to be Quakers. I don't think I live very close to anybody, but I'm thinking that I really need to connect with the other people in my apartment complex. And then I bring my Quakerism there and absorb other people. But I do think that we need to prepare for life being different.
Curious too, do friends feel like we're having right now this unique, at least in our lifetime, experience so far of trying to commune with each other and to commune with spirit with people who aren't physically in the same room as us, and using the internet and the sort of mediation of technology, which we're literally doing right this very moment. Does that, when you envision the spiritual community, I guess we've seen now sort of one vision of the future, which is sort of the almost diametric opposite of that, which is intense locality, of really being within very close physical proximity, not just in terms of being in the same room, but living close enough together that you can join together as a community, embodied community. And that's sort of the future that I see, or at least as I understand that you're describing. I wonder if anyone sees a future in which this sort of remote togetherness or distant togetherness is a part of our spiritual lives, or how that could be, or how that could form a community. Is that something that we see growing, or is that, do we, Yeah, what do people see in that?
I think in the short term, that's a possibility, but in the long term, where even electricity might be intermittent, and we might not even have such a thing as an internet. That's not going to be the case in probably at the outside 15 years. It might even be sooner. And I think this is a wonderful tool as long as we have it. And maybe we should take advantage of the fact that we have it right now to see, what can be built going forward.
I think that the practice of holding people in the light is already what did you say, James, a distantly together situation. And so in some ways, this is not new, it's new as far as worship on a weekly basis, but it's not new in terms of, I don't know, Hawaiians call it ho'opono. No, what do they call it? Is it ho'oponopono? Anyway, it's prayer, it's holding people in the light, it's, going outside of yourself and what's immediately in your physical realm, and extending it to other community.
James, I think one thing we can be sure of, if there is still a Friends meeting of Austin, and I sure hope there is, it'll be an entirely different group of people staffing the committees and mostly coming into worship and being the core of the body of the meeting. And they will be, many of them, coming from a time and a place where this kind of both distant and intimate connectivity is integral to their lives. And they will have a much, much harder time if what Delia and Heather believe in 15 years or so, that we will be without these kinds of energy intensive resources. They will have a very difficult time because they are used to instantly texting and Instagramming and whatever. They're where they are, what they're feeling, what their needs are, how to get together. And for that reason, and that reason alone, I believe that the inertia of our systems will overcome the fragility in some way. I don't know what it is, but I don't think it will be a dismantling of that level of connectivity because our younger generation needs it to survive.
Can I just point out that in 30 years, James will still be younger than most of us here are today.
He's the exception. He's the exception, right?
Yeah, knock on some wood. Be 64 at that time.
Well, my thoughts are, without trying to project or predict disruptions and discontinuities and so forth, what I can wish for and hope for is what we have as a meeting, and that is that there's still a space of inclusivity, acceptance, support, nourishment, spiritual energy, social justice, peace work, and caring about each other and the community and nation. And whether that's in a space such as we have now or other smaller groups around in house churches, we have to remember that it was, in the 1650s, I don't think yet they had it was Instagram, I think. They didn't have that in that time period, and they managed to still grow into the small group of dedicated and committed folks that we have now around the world. So I hope we just keep our testimonies, values in place when we go through whatever the next pandemic or disruption tends to be. Because I think that's what humankind has come a long way without the technology, and it can sustain itself, I think, without that, should that happen.
I think the aspirations that Tobin talks about are going to be severely tested. I don't think, I'm sure I'm not alone in being concerned that we'll be living under an authoritarian system in this country for the first time in our lives. And I can see that happening in the relatively near future and continuing for 10 or 20 years after that before things perhaps right themselves. And so my question to myself is, how are we going to be as a meeting and as a faith community under those circumstances? And what is that going to mean for the ways that we're called to take care of each other and take care of other people outside of our community at a time when I'm sure there'll be violence, there'll be people ending up in jail, and people will be tempted, including perhaps some of us, to stray a little bit from our roots and our foundations because things are so bad. So not a pretty picture, but I think it's a context in which to consider everything we're talking about.
Friends, may I ask what piece of literature you're referring to? I'm afraid I'm a little out of the loop. Are you all basing your terrible doom and gloom predictions on a certain work that you've all read? I mean, we've read The Water Will Come, Extreme Cities, Uninhabitable Earth, and so on, but I hold with Elise Boulding, that we need to image a world without war, and we need to keep on imagining that, because one of the 4 measurable cognitive moral skills we talk about in ethics now and moral psychology is the moral imagination. And if we're imagining doom and gloom instead of a wonderful world where the Austin Friends have built a few residential units and there are 2 or 3 young families, an art collective, and an organic grower group who are inhabiting the meeting area, and some people come on horses, like my former daughter-in-law, my daughter-in-law from hell, who is an engineer and did a lot of research in environmental engineering. And she thinks maybe we could just not go back, but have more local communal communities and even use a few horses who provide good manure. Chickens, I can see some chickens. We'd have to have a problem about the cocks during meeting, but not have it too early. I don't understand why you insist on accepting. I know we're going to have power outages. I've been teaching my students about it for years, but we'll also have a lot of solar collectors. And yeah, climate change will bring a layer of water vapor that may shield some of our solar panels, but I think the world, we need to imagine very vigorously a world in which people finally got the message that Quakerism expresses, it speaks to their condition. And that there may not be as many poor surviving. There may be epidemics from the large number of very poor who die, and even the very rich affected. But I think Austin Friends has a lot of potential for the future. I have to believe that, or I'll die of despair.
I think in terms of environmental change and the degradation of technological civilization does not preclude what you're talking about, Sally. In fact, I think it's an opportunity.
I'd just like to say that I'm not a doom and gloom person. I'm accused of being the opposite, but I do, I think the whole planet is in a time of what I call a healing crisis. And we have opportunity, and we do create the future to a certain degree. And I think I have great faith in our youth. They are amazing, and they have different brains from us, and they'll come up with solutions, I'm quite sure, and be our teachers. And older people have their wisdom, and we're the only constant is change. So yeah, here we've had to deal with going on Zoom, which is really great, I think. I mean, I also think it's great to be in physical presence, but I'm sure that maybe the younger people or somebody will come up with new ideas about connecting, technology and everything else. And maybe to do that, we have to have things crash like we are now. Anyway, I do hold great hope for the future. And I think Austin Friends have a lot to offer. But I just want to say one more thing. I think as regards 30 years ago and now, there are many more people who are meditating, who are getting together in groups, and they may not be Quakers, but they have the same hearts, they have intention, just a different path. But there are so many people holding the light now. And I have great faith in that. Thank you.
So yeah, I believe that there's so many more that are holding this earth and planet in the light, and not all are Quakers. There's a lot of people out there doing that. And I think it's not. I think there's some areas that are going to be better. If in 30 years, some things are going to, community may be stronger, and our lives will slow down. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. I know no crystal ball here. There are technologies out there that maybe won't require us to mine the little bit left of the earth, knocking down mountains to get that little inkling of something that will help us have energy in our solar panels. There's a lot of, we have limited resources in those areas, but things we are not limited in is our capacity to love, our capacity to forgive, our capacity to be, to give of ourselves to others. What Julian has said, I think is something that I too feel is that there will be economic turmoil when you have environmental turmoil. You look right now what's happening in many parts of the world, and we're not that far away any longer. It's at our doorsteps. It's not even at our doorsteps. It's here right now. We have water in Flint that people can't drink. We have people dying in this country of malnutrition and things like that. So we have it right now. I'm hearing, in parts of the country that crops are failing because of the environment right now, not future, but right now. I'm hearing cows are suffering as a result of this right now. So giving it another 5 years, where will those cows be? Where will the crops be? And if people are hungry, and if HEB no longer has what they have right now, but just a few months ago they didn't have some of those things, and people were really kind of, there wasn't any violence that I know of, but it's the beginning of that anxiousness that people start feeling that, I think as Quakers, we can speak to. And as Quakers and as people of faith and people of goodwill, all of us, not just Quakers, but all of us together can be what we can be. And if we are right now, while we're here, able to love each other through this, through our fears, and I don't want despair. I don't want it at all, and I'm pushing that away. But every day I wake up with this concern in my heart. And I think about Emberly, that, where will Emberly be in 30 years? She will be 33. What will be there for her? And so, we have this Glasgow meeting wasn't anything to get us excited. It didn't make me feel better. And we're 20. We talk about another 20 years from now, things will be down to this. No, it's now. And so if we love each other, we'll talk about now and what we can do, because 10 years from now we might not have the same hand in front of us. I don't know. I'm talking too much. Please forgive me.
Can I just tag on, since it's the same open microphone? I really think that concrete visioning of exactly how this might be, such as Sally mentioned, are really important for us to do.
One thought that comes to me is that in any projection of the future, we tend to base it on our current circumstances and think, will it be better? Will it be worse, based on what we are experiencing now? We forget that a generation or two ago, we didn't have nearly as much of this, quote, affluence, and that right now, as Gandhi points out, there are a large proportion population that don't have this privilege and good setting for us. So I guess the point is, we have to remember that we're looking at it from a very, very privileged point of view in the first place, and that we have a long way that we can go and still be a vibrant community, should we choose to be. In whatever setting comes up, we do not have to have the same material goods or the same technological goods and processes in order to keep doing what Quakers have done since 1650s and on.
I hope this, what I'm about to say, helps, given the foregoing conversation. My concern is that our witness as friends will be tested in a way that hasn't been tested in our lifetimes. And I also see in that a certain silver lining for the community, because we know from the history of the society that when our witness has been sorely tested, we've had a tendency to come together and to strengthen our relationships with each other and our support for each other. And that in witnessing under those circumstances, we send a message of hope and light to people outside our community. So the notion that we're heading into dark times is not without hope and opportunities for hope.
Yesterday, I listened to the Friends Historical Association talk. It was about the archives they're creating in Quakerism, of Quakers in Africa. And there was a very interesting talk on that, about the history of Quakerism in Africa from a theological and a very interesting point of view. I'm bringing this up because the African Friends are facing many of these things. They don't necessarily, they have electricity, They only have it some of the time. They have water, but sometimes they have to bring it from a far distance. But the emphasis of this was the distinctions that Quakers have and bring into the Christian community, mostly there at this point. It really impressed me that they are holding those distinctions, and it's those distinctions that we really need to carry on, even in the times, and I think we are doing it. I mean, I think our COVID relief, we could be doing more. We could really be doing more right here in Austin. But we really have done quite a bit in the past, and we just need to look today to doing more, to being part of this community, being a really vibrant part of showing God's love in this community, right here where we are, without looking way to the future. We're on a good trajectory, but let's accelerate it, is what I say.
Just speaking sort of for myself, I've been thinking about this a lot lately, which is why sort of one of the reasons why I decided to bring this forum topic forward this morning. And I guess I feel like I see both a huge need and a huge possibility in what our sort of Quaker witness has for the world and what God's love has for the world, and a great need for people to be together and to listen and to be open and to experience those things. And that so much of the world is sort of conspiring to shut those things off from us. I was just terrified when Facebook announced that it's now Meta to try to create the metaverse, and I just figured this people being sort of locked into this world that's entirely mediated and controlled by people who have other interests, not necessarily evil, but just not the interests of humanity and love and compassion is their drive, and that we hopefully as a community can be something that offers that to the world. And I think in terms of the future, I feel that in order to be that, in order to offer that, that we need to be there and let people know that we're here. 30 years kind of alarms me. One reason is that I love being active and part of this. I do see that I'm one of the very few people in my sort of age range who is actively involved in the care of the meeting. And that gives me great concern. I really don't know how this, in its current form at least, is going to be sustainable unless there are more people who are sort of younger who take up these sort of structures and organizations. And maybe they do need to change a little bit to accommodate that reality, but I feel like it's important to see that future and to see what we're going for too. I love the visions that you guys were sharing of what this meeting could look like in 30 years. And I feel like part of that is just reaching out and really letting people know that we're here and that we're a possibility, and that it's not just, Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, that you have this way of being with other people that is open and that's an option. And I think there's a hunger for that. Heather was speaking to that with that there are so many people who do practice this and who do feel that need for spirit in their life and for that sort of connection and community. And I feel like we owe it to them to reach out to them and to ourselves too. I really think we need to see that future and to try to reach towards it and to try to continue to revitalize and build and grow and encourage people to come so that we can meet all of these challenges that we're describing today, which are very sobering.
So we've got the 30-year time frame. I don't think we're going to get to 100 or 200.
Oh man, I know we've only got 10 minutes left. No, we don't have 10 minutes left. We're supposed to pause now. Well, I guess 100 and 200 years we'll have to wait until the future. So I apologize, friends, that we didn't get into the truly wild science fiction future. Just into the, I feel like the immediate, it seemed like the immediate future was plenty for us to consider for this
There's
hour.
time for that.
There's time for that. That's true. We've got a little
James,
while.
I just want to thank you, James, because as I was listening to you speak, I'm realizing that the forums that I've attended that you do, they're all the ones I remember, you're always like giving plenty of time for queries and reflection. And as it may be because of your age, maybe because it's your personality, but it's not eldering. And I appreciate not being eldered and lectured, or this is just the Quaker way, this is how we've done things, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so I hope that going forward, we can have more of this listening that you've promoted. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I really love both hearing the visions of the future and also hearing your memories of 1991. That was really meaningful for me. So thank you all for that. So I think we should probably break before meeting for worship, but thank you, everyone.